I'm Robert LeBoyer, Senior Biotechnology Analyst at Noble Capital. Our next presenting company is Unicycive, and here to tell us about the company's product, OLC, is CEO Dr. Shalub Gupta. Go ahead, Dr. Gupta.
Robert, thank you for having me, and thanks for the audience who are joining us for this presentation. I'll be making forward-looking statements, so I'll encourage you to read our fair disclosure. By way of background, our company is focused on treatment of kidney diseases. We have two drugs in clinical development. Our lead drug is oxylanthanum carbonate, which is expected PDUFA date a few days from now. And our second drug is UNI-494, which is for treatment of acute and chronic kidney diseases. I'll be talking mostly about our lead drug, given it is the primary value driver for us in the very near term. Just to start with the background, chronic kidney disease is basically patients who are in the last stage of chronic kidney disease, which is CKD, or end-stage kidney disease, ESKD, stage 5, affects roughly 500,000 patients in the US. 80% of these patients need something to manage their phosphate. Phosphate is something that you and I, or most of us, if we have a normal kidney function, will not have to worry about. But patients who have impaired kidney function, their phosphate stays in the body and combines with calcium and causes these patients to die from atherosclerosis, as well as causes vascular calcification that causes all types of problem and causes fractures, soft tissue deposition of these calcification, as well as mortality and morbidity, which I'll give you more detail in a minute. This class of drug in the US sells for over $1.25 billion, and globally it is over $2.5 billion. Unicycive's OLC is patent-protected drug throughout the world, and we have partnerships in Asia, one in South Korea, the other one is for China market. The question then you may ask yourself, you said high phosphate is a problem. What is the problem? What is the extent of problem? This graph tells you that 1 milligram per deciliter increase in serum phosphate causes increase in mortality by 10 to 15%. And the higher the serum phosphate level, the larger the risk of mortality. Similarly, if you look at the graph on the right side, higher the serum phosphate level, the higher the risk of hospitalization. So serum phosphate is something, it's not a trivial biochemical parameter. If you see a patient with a high serum phosphate, physicians want to manage it. And if we manage it well, it can prevent long-term complication and mortality. So the question then comes out to what has been going on for the last few years for these patients. What you will find in this graph, this is over a decade-long data that shows no matter how you look at it, if you look at it from a more conservative number, which is 4.5 milligram per deciliter, which is the target serum phosphate level, you find 75% of US patient population that does not achieve their serum target phosphate level. If you are generous and you say, well, I'm willing to give a little bit more leeway, which is 5.5 milligram per deciliter, you still find 44% of the US patient population that does not meet the goal. This is with the background that there are already FDA-approved drugs. This is not a disease condition where there is nothing ever been approved. It's a condition where people have other options. And that begs the question, why is this case? So we'll give you this background. These patients who are on dialysis and have high phosphate are taking 20 to 30 pills per day. When you ask a patient on a self-reported basis, 66% of patients, 60% of patients say they forget to take the pills. If you ask physicians who are taking care of these patients, and this is the graph, what you see on the bottom left side of the slide, we ask 100 US nephrologists an unaided question: what is the number one problem that you see for your patients with hyperphosphatemia? And the number one answer is the pill burden. On the top, you see the number of pills these patients are taking. They are taking on an average 20 to 30 pills per day. This is a pill burden which is not for one day, 1 week, 1 month. It is for the rest of their life. So it is not surprising that patients do not want to take the pills or forget to take the pills because hyperphosphatemia is asymptomatic, doesn't cause chest pain, doesn't cause abdominal pain, doesn't cause them to feel the symptoms immediately. And this is why patients forget to take the pills and they don't see immediate consequences. But we already saw in the previous slide that hyperphosphatemia does cause a lot of mortality and morbidity risk to these patients. So, building upon that, the product that we have is a patented drug. We have composition of matter patent, which is one of the strongest patent protection that you can get in our industry. We have a drug which is utilizing nanoparticle technology that allows the drug to be in a smaller size. We talk about pill burden. Our drug allows patient to take a size of a baby aspirin pill 3 times a day, 1 time with each meal, as opposed to traditionally available at 9, 12, 15 pills per day. And I'll show you that pill burden is one problem, but the the context of this is the landscape. You see on the left side, on the top left side, you see Renvela, which has got a 6 pills to start with, and you see Fosno on the other side, you see 6 pills to start with. But these are starting doses. These patients start with 6 pills, but many of them are taking 9 pills, 12 pills, 15 pills, 18 pills per day. But then you see on the bottom right, you see Velphoro, you see Fosrenol. What you will note that these are large size pills, but they're not that many number of pills. So the pill burden relates to a large number of pills. That's number one. But there are solutions where patients can take a fewer pills. And as you can see with Velphoro, they can take only 3 pills per day. But the other problem is that when they take a drug like Velphoro, there's a large size pills. And you may say that, well, I don't really care. I can take large size pills. But we are asking these patients to chew the pill. Velphoro and Fosrenol need to be chewed. If they don't chew the pill, a drug like Fosrenol, it sits in the gut, does not get absorbed, does not have any impact of what it was supposed to do. So in summary, there are 3 problems. And number one is large number of pills. Number two is large size pills if it is not large number of pills. And three, large size pills that have to be chewed. And going back to our drug for a second, patented nanoparticle technology allows us to make one small pill. That is a 500 milligram pill that we talk about the starting dose. And even if patients have to take, let's say, for some 70% of patients in the recent clinical trial were being able to manage with 3 pills per day. But if they need more pills, they can take more than 1 pill with each meal. But still, the size of the pill and the fact that they can swallow the pill allows a solution for most of these patients. So talking about the clinical data, I'll walk you through a few slides here. This is the data we generated with the most recent clinical trial. We call it pivotal clinical trial. This is the data that was focused on generating tolerability data, which was a requirement for a regulatory approval process. This clinical trial was not designed for efficacy. It was primarily focused on tolerability. And for FDA purposes, the tolerability definition is how many patients were discontinuing after they were put on the drug for any cause. In our clinical trial, that discontinuation rate is 5.8% or 6% to round it up. If you compare to the comparator drug, which is Fosrenol, that discontinuation rate is 14%. We also observed certain adverse event profile, which was very helpful for us to know because prior to this clinical trial, we ran 2 healthy volunteer trials. And as we can expect, the drugs react or work very differently in healthy volunteers with a chronic kidney disease patient who are on dialysis. So this data was remarkable because we see diarrhea of 9% and vomiting of 6%. And when I say remarkable, because these were 86 subjects, 86 patients who were given this drug. And for as much as some of these patients were given as much as 10 weeks, these patients were started on the drug and they were titrated up to 6 weeks. And then they were a 4-week, quote unquote, maintenance dose. So some of these patients were exposed to this drug for at least for almost 10 weeks. What we find This diarrhea of 9%, vomiting of 6% is a number. And you may say to yourself, but that doesn't seem that impressive. But when you see in the context of what other drugs have on their label, you see the adverse event profile of our drug in this pivotal clinical trial was better than anything else is you see on the market that is currently approved. This is the label for all approved drugs that are currently available on the market. And I want to specifically focus on Renvela because it is the drug that is given to more than 50% of patients, or more than 50% of patients in the US and globally are on Renvela. You look at vomiting, nausea, and diarrhea, none of these side effect profiles you see in that severity that you see with Renvela. Our adverse event profile is roughly half or less than half of what you see with Renvela. Also, Renvela is a polymer, so it has its own unique set of challenges, which it's a polymer. It goes into the gut while it absorbs phosphate, but it also swells up and causes bloating. You see dyspepsia, abdominal pain, flatulence, and constipation. All of that leads for patients to not feel good. Because they don't feel good, they don't want to take the pill because the pill is making them feel sick, and they therefore become non-compliant. There are many other adverse event profile for other drugs. I won't go through everything, but I just wanted to call out the AE profile of our drug versus Renvela. On the left-hand side is the adverse event profile of fosrenol. And it's important because we are following a regulatory pathway, which is 505(b)(2). And fosrenol is what we are comparing ourselves to. But if you look at just fosrenol alone, you see the nausea and vomiting, again, a lot lower and less than half of that of Renvela. One of the other part of this clinical trial was the efficacy. Even though the drug was not designed, the trial wasn't designed for efficacy, but we saw efficacy as a byproduct of titration. Beginning of the clinical trial, roughly 59% of patients were able to achieve their target serum phosphate level, which is for this trial was set as 5.5 milligram per deciliter. And only 59% of patients were able to achieve that clinical trial guideline that was recommended. This was based on whatever their physician thought was the best drug for them to as much as they could tolerate. So in other words, we had no say about what patients would get, how much dose they get. This is a standard of care. This is what looks like a real world evidence or real world data. But after 6 weeks being on a treatment, roughly 90% patients were able to achieve that result. And this is remarkable. It's remarkable because the difference is not a small jump in percentage. We are talking about 31% difference. And the reason I say this to you, because this clinical trial was non-randomized, single-arm study, an open-label study. So it is prone for biases. And that is something that we should note. And therefore, if there was a marginal improvement, we would say this is a clinical trial setting, it probably may not be applicable in real world. While that is the case, and the numbers may be lower in the real world setting, but 90% improvement compared to 59% is 31% of delta, which when we talk to physicians and clinicians who have been taking care of these patients for decades and decades, they say this is something they have not seen before. So the results are remarkable in terms of efficacy. But more importantly, what we realized to our own surprise that 70% or 69% of patients, to be precise, were being able to manage with one pill 3 times a day. In fact, 14% of patients did not even need 3 pills. They only needed 2 pills. The way these drugs are given, they're given with the meal. If a patient does not take a meal, for example, if a patient skips lunch or skips breakfast, then they're supposed to take 2 pills with a bigger meal. So if a patient skips breakfast, has a larger lunch, and then dinner, they will take 2 pills with lunch and 1 with dinner. But as you can see, just 1,000 milligram doses seem to be effective for at least 14% of patients. These are patient-reported outcomes. Not surprisingly, patients prefer to take our drug versus whatever else they were on earlier. They believe it's easy to take, they feel satisfied, and this is their preferred therapy. When asked the question more openly, these are the parts of patient-reported outcomes part of our clinical trial. I want to focus a little bit upon the commercial strategy, and then we can talk more about in Q&A. Robert will come back, and there are some discussions we can talk about how we think about a drug. So far, I've told you this is a big market opportunity, over $1 billion sales, 1.25 or $1.5 billion sales last year in the US. We have potential best-in-class drug. We have a very near-term approval timeline. So then the question comes out to how are you thinking about commercializing the drug? I wanted to just address one part here, and then we can talk more about this in Q&A as well. These patients who are on dialysis, they are covered by what is called dual coverage. They're covered by both Medicare as well as Medicaid. Dialysis is the one and only disease that I'm aware of where patients, regardless of their age, qualify for both Medicare as well as Medicaid. Thinking about how these patients get coverage, 1/3 of the patients are covered, if you will, by Medicare Part D, which is Medicare Part, which called fee-for-service. Another 1/3 is Medicare Advantage, and the remaining goes through commercial insurance. Starting January 1, 2025, these patients who were Medicare fee-for-service, they've gone from Medicare Part D to Part B as in boy, and that allows a more seamless coverage in short term, and then longer term, these drugs then become part of a ESRD bundle payment. And I'll talk more about it, but this particular program is called TDAPA that allows any new drug, including a drug like ours, when it gets approved, to be able to get reimbursement through Part B. And that helps to take away the friction, which is a typical initial launches of any new drug in any category will face. So we are working on launch our initiatives, but most important part here is that, and which one thing that if you could remember about a commercial launch for our drug is that it is something that a small company can do. The reason is that 50% of the drug prescriber are a small handful of physicians, which is roughly 2,100 physicians all across the country. And even though the dialysis patients are spread all over the country, but they're not spread equally, they are more concentrated in certain parts of the country. So you can have a small number of sales force or sales reps and still be able to launch a commercially launch the drug and make it available for all those who need it. We talked about the patent, so I won't talk about it. We have composition matter patent. We have granted patent till 2031, and the patent term extension, which gets upon FDA approval, it goes through 2035. I'm going to just talk briefly about our team, and as I mentioned, in the interest of time, we'll talk more about any questions that may come up during Q&A. From the very beginning, we decided to keep our team small and be very focused and be nimble. We have team members who have been part of the R&D teams that have had many drugs approval. In fact, 2 of our team members had 3 drugs approval back to back, year after year after year, which is hard to do for most companies, and even in big pharmaceutical companies, that's a rare feat to be able to accomplish. We have Doug, who has led 2 of the products in this class of drug to commercialize it, including launching Renvela and growing it to over $1 billion in market in the US. We have world-class scientific advisory board, folks who have been in this industry, this particular disease category, have written guidelines, have run clinical trials for the last 2+ decades. And we have board members who have been in the industry for a number of years. Lastly, we are backed by a great syndicate of investors. We are very grateful to them for their support, their belief, and their trust in us. And these are our upcoming milestones. Next few quarters are really exciting for us. We have an approval, we have a launch. In this environment where people are more risk averse, we feel we have an opportunity to make a dent for patients, for physicians, and for our investors. I'll be very happy to answer any questions you may have, and thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. That was very informative. And one of the things that you didn't really have time to touch on was that the patients on renal dialysis who are candidates for the drug go on to renal dialysis after years of hypertension and diabetes. So it's not just how many pills would you like to take, it's
Right.
how many additional pills would
Correct.
you like to take. So in terms of the launch readiness and approval, could you tell us where you are in terms of readiness to launch the product and get the drug into the market?
Absolutely. Robert, what we have done is to think about this as a plan which we've been working on for a number of months, a number of quarters. So we have hired some of the senior leadership team to be able to get the key functions within the company. We work with a lot of outside vendors. I talk about Doug, who had been, the leader who launched 2 of these products in the past, including Renvela for Genzyme, and worked for a number of years with Orixia, which then was originally with Carix and then became Akebia. So things like, just to name a few, commercial operations, we have hired team members inside market access. We are working with team members. We have hired people for business intelligence. The goal to manage both the launch and be ready is to have the sales rep ready. Upon approval, we have the sales rep, we hire them in-house. But a lot of work we have done in advance, getting in front of physicians, getting in front of the KOLs, number of ad boards that we have done. We've been talking to these 2,100 physicians that we talked about it. Many of these physicians know about our product, which is a great thing, but you can do all this work before the drug is approved. Of course, the sales rep come upon approval and then you hire them and you launch the drug. But we've been working on it for a number of months, so we feel pretty excited about it. And we are ready as soon as the drug is available. We will be very happy to bring it out to the patients and to the physicians.
Yes, I've been looking forward to it as well. And could you talk about any additional context on the reimbursement landscape and just help us understand some of the implications that TDAPA has for the launch and whether you expect it to be granted TDAPA status?
Right. So start with the last question first. We expect to be granted TDAPA status because we qualify for the type of NDA that is in guidelines with CMS. So we feel quite certain about the TDAPA application and getting a granting of that TDAPA designation. Think about TDAPA, Robert, as a tailwind that will help us to launch. In any drug that gets launched ever in the US market, there will be some time it takes to be able to get to the peak. But with a TDAPA designation, think about it as a wind in your sail. It helps to take away the friction because CMS pays for these patients. It's a short period of time, but it's 100% of average selling price, which takes away any reason that a patient would not be on a drug. If a physician prescribes it, these patients get reimbursed, and that helps patients. It helps dialysis organization because then they don't have to worry about getting reimbursement. And this is a way that the government has incentivized for innovative products to come to the market.
Yes, that idea of encouraging innovation is behind TDAPA. So this fits very well with your data and the whole product. In terms of getting dialysis provider organizations to cover and provide access, could you discuss that a little bit and maybe touch on any cost savings or reduction in hospitalizations from controlling phosphate levels the way some of the early slides discussed?
Hospitalization is a consequence of hyperphosphatemia. There is not a single person in this industry who wants to see a patient go to the hospital. It's bad for patient. It's bad for healthcare system. Every single hospitalization, even if it is an ER visit, costs thousands and thousands of dollars. And as you saw, there are dramatic cost savings if you can manage phosphate. In addition, the dialysis providers, we are talking to all of them because we think of them as their potential partners, collaborators, because there is an opportunity to get the drug to as many people as possible by working with these dialysis organizations.
So this is not just better outcome for the patients and financial incentives to the doctors. There's a cost savings for the providers as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So everybody should encourage patients to use this.
Yes, absolutely, Robert. Absolutely.
Okay. And in terms of other players in the space, any comments on them and how you're going to compete?
I think as somebody has mentioned that you can put a great marketing team behind a mediocre product, and the great team can sell the product, but the product attributes limited. Robert, what is most exciting for us in my team is that we have a potential best-in-class drug, and this attribute of the drug allows it to, the moment physicians see the data, they feel this is the commonest feedback we get. It's a no-brainer. This is the physician feedback. And when we were recruiting patients in clinical trial, the moment we show the plaque with a small pulse, every patient wants to be part of the clinical trial. So we feel there is a huge amount of a pull. There are times that you launch a product with a push strategy, but there is a pull here in the market that will help us. And it is a pretty big size market. Even a small number of patients leads to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. So that is something just to keep in mind.
Yes, and I agree with you. That slide with all of the pills, really, it's a very dramatic difference between your drug and the competition. And like you said, the data speaks for itself.
Right. The only one add on, I'll say, is a potential best-in-class drug because it has a dramatic efficacy, but it's also efficacy with quite a well-tolerated adverse event profile. All these drugs, regardless of whichever, there's not a single drug that's approved in this indication that doesn't cause GI gastrointestinal side effect, but our drug had one of the lowest adverse event profile in the clinical trial.
Yes, so you touched on that briefly, but yes, the side effect profile, in addition to efficacy, is also very advantageous.
Right.
So, just in the interest of time, could you just reiterate some of the milestones that we can look forward to over the next couple of months?
Approval of our drug, then launch of the drug, applying for TDAPA, getting TDAPA designation, and then being able to show the sales of the drug as we go forward. These are all the key milestones that are upcoming, and they are very, very near term, Robert. So very excited about that.
Yes, I'll be watching the news every day, waiting for these things to come through.
Thank you,
So,
Robert.
thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to seeing these milestones and hearing from you again.
Thank you so much, Robert, and thank you to the viewers.
Okay. Have a great day, everybody.